So there are actually a large team of facilitators involved in this project. So we're just going to be toggling our screens back and forth. So I apologize for any kind of glitches that might occur on the end user there. So for everyone who's signed in to the session, thank you, Teresa, by the way, for doing the intro. And thank you to the participant for having joined this workshop. We're really excited to present our work. We called our workshop Structured Feedback Through Simulation. What this is really about is giving difficult and negative feedback. So the objective of our workshop, which is quite short, 55 minutes, is to accomplish the challenging task of providing learners of various levels a kind of feedback that is necessary and occasionally unpleasant if it's not done correctly. So we want to be able to provide you, the faculty members of health sciences education, to when you find yourself in a situation where you have to give a feedback that's rather negative and that it's important, that you have the skills and the organizations and framework to use so that you're enabled to do that without feeling intimidated or anxious about it. So we're going to run the workshop. I'm just going to show you the team names here. So we have Sharon Ball, who's a family physician. She's a pre-clerkship coordinator at Waterloo Regional Campus. When I'm reading out your name, if you don't mind just giving a wave so that everyone knows who you are. Krista Dalhos is a family medicine resident who's going to the EM program in Waterloo, and she is a med ed enthusiast and wrote the debriefing notes for the cases. Aaron is the WRC standardized patient program lead. He created the videos and co-created one of the other videos as well, and edited the videos, and trained the standardized learners who are actors at our campus to act as the learners that you're going to give the feedback to. Isla McPherson is a family physician, assistant pre-clerkship coordinator at the Waterloo Region Campus, and she also, with Sharon, wrote case 2. Quang is a pediatric EM physician and a SIM educator. He wrote, co-created, as well as acted in the video of the first case. I am an emergency physician and faculty development coordinator at the regional campus, and I oversaw the workshop. Jennifer Tran has joined us as the admin assistant for the program, faculty development program, and will be helping with managing the chat, as well as taking notes for our feedback to do it better the next time. We're also very happy to be joined with standardized learners that has been working with Aaron in terms of acting as the learner in these cases. So a word about the learners, that they're people who are trained actors and they're not particularly well versed in details about medical knowledge and skills and things like that. So we created learning objectives for you to give feedback on that are not specific to the medical expert or clinical expert realm. Hopefully the person who's giving the feedback to the learner will not be asking specific questions as to patient care topics, and because that would not be the objective of this exercise. I will leave Quang to review this slide. This is actually a copy from his slide deck, so I'm going to move on here. This point, I think I'm just going to exit this full screen here. So in terms of the agenda of the day, first we're going to, hang on, I'm just going to pull up our agenda. First, Quang is going to give a few minutes of a didactic talk on the advocacy inquiry framework of giving difficult feedback. And then we're going to stay in a large group and do showing of the video of our first case. And then we're going to break up into 3 small groups, and then we'll assign 2 people, 2 facilitators for each of the 3 groups, plus 1 standardized learner to each of the groups. And then we will ask volunteers from the participant pool to use the Advocacy Inquiry framework to give the feedback. So we hopefully will have 1 or 2 people per case. We will then move on. Similarly, we'll come back into the larger group. We'll show a second video, and then we will move on then to small group work again. So we will try and maintain everyone in the same group so that we can build our momentum created from the first case. So Quang, if you're ready, we can get started with the didactic slide deck.
Whoops. Okay, so let me just share this. Just a few housekeeping things here to talk about. Thanks very much, Catherine. McMaster University sits on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas and the Haudenosaunee nations, and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. In terms of disclosures, conflicts of interest, our group does not have any. However, Dr. Tong has received honoraria from the Ontario College of Family Physicians. Otherwise, no commercial support, and the committee does not have any conflicts of interest either. So what we really want to do is talk a little bit about feedback and how it relates to performance, and then learn to use advocacy inquiry. And this really comes from where I live. I live in the clinician educator space, and I do a lot of simulation. I'm the PEM fellowship director, and I used to be the associate program director for PEDS. So when it comes to feedback, I've had a lot of opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them. So this is just really interesting. If you want to scan this, it scans to a really interesting article. The picture in the bottom reminds me of a story. I did Taekwondo growing up. My father taught me, and he's a military guy, fought in the Vietnam War. Decided one day I needed to learn. And I remember as a teenager, and as teenagers are, they don't listen to their parents. And so my dad and I would spar, and he would tell me to put my hands up, and I wouldn't put my hands up because it's not cool. And he'd tell me to put my hands up, and I wouldn't. And the 3rd time, put your hands up, I wouldn't. 4th time, I got a kick to the face or midsection. And it wasn't, it's funny because the feedback was immediate, but in fact, I never felt that it was harsh, and I don't have any ill feelings towards my dad because it came from a place of trust. And I think the article talks a bit about this, is that we've got to this point where we think now difficult conversations, we're equating them to maltreatment or mistreatment, and they're not. The problem is now, because of that, people are shying away from these difficult conversations and critical feedback. And what we actually need to do is equip ourselves with the tools necessary to have these conversations. And this is what this is all about. The problem is learners report frustration at the lack of feedback during medical training. We don't know if this is because we don't label feedback well, or if it's because it's an issue of quality of feedback. Good feedback is important because if you don't get it, good performance isn't reinforced, mistakes are never corrected, and we may never actually achieve competence. We've all said these. I know I've said them. I will freely admit them. We've all heard these, and these are pieces of feedback that are not useful. They're not useful for a lot of different reasons. I won't get into evidence-based feedback, but a lot of this, it's not specific, it's not observed, maybe there's no way forward. These are reasons why this is not useful to our learners. Let's consider your preconceptions, right? You watch Yo-Yo Ma, you watch Wayne Gretzky, you watch anybody, with Michael Jordan and his documentary recently, people are looking at this again, and they're saying, wow, these people are geniuses. They operate at a level very different from us. And there's this idea that expert level talent produces expert level performance, and it's based on some level of innate ability. I want to reframe our conversation and convince you that, in fact, expert level practice leads to expert level performance. And it's this idea of deliberate practice that's so important, and it ties directly back into how well we give feedback to our learners. If we give good feedback to our learners, we can actually elevate their performance to a level where, in fact, it looks like that of an expert. I love this cartoon because it really encompasses what feedback actually is. It is simply a mirror, right? Feedback is a mirror with the intention of narrowing the gap between what the learner perceives and their actual performance. And we need to narrow that gap so that hopefully homework actually looks like that in the mirror. This brings us to this idea of advocacy inquiry. Advocacy inquiry is important because feedback essentially means that you need to be able to diagnose the patient before you treat their disease. We're all familiar with that as clinicians, but as learners, it should be the same way. You need to be able to treat the learner by understanding what their actual problem is. Once you understand the problem, then you can actually create a plan to move forward. Advocacy inquiry, this molecule over here, there's 3 parts to it, and then I'll get at this first of all. This is the basic assumption. So the next 2 slides, this one and the next one, essentially are advocacy inquiry in a nutshell. The basic assumption is that we believe everyone participating in activities here at McMaster is intelligent, capable, cares about everything they wanted, and they want to do their best. And in fact, they want to improve. This is not a comment on the actual bell curve of people's abilities in the community, right? I'm not talking about people's actual ability. What I'm saying is this is the starting point that I have. As long as I understand this, I can then actually engage with my learners because I think that they actually want to get better. That when they do something wrong, it's not because they're trying to be malicious about it, but because there's a reason why they did it. The second part about advocacy inquiry, and the most important part, is get curious, right? Rather than assume that my learner is late because they're lazy, maybe there's a reason why, and I need to understand that. Tell me, like, what's going on? Why is this happening? That's the core of advocacy inquiry. Why is it effective? Because advocacy inquiry focuses on the frames of why a learner behaves the way they do. The frames are assumptions, feelings, their experiences, everything they bring to the table. These result in actions, and actions result in results. We see results, and we try to feedback based on what we see. Advocacy inquiry allows you to explore the underlying assumption about why they did something rather than just the action. So we talk about single loop and double loop learning. Single loop learning focuses on the action to get a desired result. Think about sports, right? Think about piano. My daughter's in piano right now. The piano teacher says you need to use your fingers in a certain way. That results in a better way to play your notes, or a different fingering to be more effective. But in fact, what we really want to do is concentrate on the double loop. In other words, this idea that we can work on the action, but more importantly, we can work on the frame because we can change behavior that way. AI structure is very practical. Tell me what you saw. So start with the observation and then advocate for why it's important. I noticed you didn't start CPR on that pulseless child. It's important because time is brain. And if you don't start CPR, the outcome is very, very bad. So tell me what happened. Tell me how you saw that. Tell me, am I seeing this correctly, right? So that's where it is. Advocate for the position and then ask them about their own perspective about it. This slide, Catherine showed you a little bit earlier. This will be, we'll post this up because I find this is nice as a reminder of how to use the AI structure when you're talking to your learner. This is an example of an anesthesia resident who had a patient who desaturated, so you can see here. And the action that people noticed was they were looking around for a pulse oximeter. Advocacy inquiry allows you to ask, well, why were you looking for it? The frame was the pulse oximeter is the only way that I can measure hypoxia and subsequently a patient's ability to breathe. You can then understand that, in fact, if they don't know that there are other more reliable ways of assessing breathing, right, you may not actually fix the problem. Once you can teach them that, in fact, looking at somebody's chest rise, if you can listen to their chest or you look at their color, it's a better way. They don't necessarily look around for a pulse oximeter. They simply assess the patient clinically. So you can see how that addresses the actual problem and not just the action that you felt was concerning. I'll just make a little plug. Sometimes this does fall apart, right? So sociopathic behavior, someone who actually doesn't care, so violates the basic assumption, it's hard where you can't really use AI with them. Safety concerns. So something bad is about to happen. Somebody's about to operate on the wrong leg. You can't use AI. You should simply stop things and then, use very directive feedback. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the rules of the game as we move into our rooms. We talk about the Vegas principle. What happens in each room stays in each room, right? So we don't talk about your performance there. It's very disconcerting sometimes to have to perform in front of other people. So please be reassured, we're not talking about your performance here. We assume the basic assumption about all of you. In other words, you're here because you want to get better. And so we're going to try to facilitate that. And the more you participate, the easier that becomes. Okay, the other thing is there is a safe word. So like 50 Shades of Grey, anybody who calls time out means that we can actually stop, rewind. You can either restart the sentence or the scenario, or ask a friend to jump in with you as well. So very open and easy.